Good morning. I just want to ask your patience, if you would. Our keynote speaker has gotten a little hung up in traffic, so she'll just be another 5 minutes or so. So just bear with us. We'll get started in about 5 minutes. Thanks so much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My sincere apologies for the late start, but I'm hoping we'll catch up on time as we go through the day. I have the proud privilege of welcoming all of you to this very special program that we are doing for 2 days. And it's, I have to say, in many ways, I'm very happy to see you, but also very sad that the topic is such that brings us together. A warm welcome, Naina, to you. Thank you for being here, and to Karuna for joining us this morning. Since a lot of you have come here, are interacting with us for the first time, I thought I'd just take a few minutes and explain who we are and what we do for a day job. A sales pitch is always welcome, right? You have a mic, you have to do the sales pitch. So here goes. Ananta Center, formerly part of Aspen Institute, India, is an independent organization that seeks to foster positive change in society through dissemination of knowledge. It focuses on leadership development and encourages frank and open dialogue on the most important challenges facing society today. We try to foster transformation of Indian society in different ways by engaging civil society, including business, NGOs, governments, and other stakeholders. We run a very strong leadership program for different age groups, and I'm delighted that our partners for the high school program, the Sri Ram School, are here, well represented. And I'm also very proud that 5 of our fellows from the Leadership Initiative for the seniors, and when I say seniors, are accomplished people in the age group of 35 to 45. 5 of them are going to be speaking with you all during the course of the 2 days. So a warm welcome to all of you in the audience. We are very happy to partner with EmancipAction, an international non-profit organization dedicated to ending the commercial sexual exploitation of children around the world, headed by Laura Entwistle. Laura, thank you for this partnership. I can't resist but share this little anecdote of, it's not an anecdote, it's just a data point, that we had Laura's husband, Brooks, on our board for many years. And I didn't know the second half of that couple. And Brooks stepped down just a few months ago. And interestingly, as he stepped down, I was introduced to Laura. So loss on one side, gain on the other for our institution. Thank you, Laura. This special conference of the next 2 days will witness in-depth discussion on issues of concern to all of us. It would be great if you could all actively participate, because that is what the strength of this program is all about, active participation by each and every one of you. 2 strong program additions that we have. One is the dance performance by the Battery Dance Company this evening, and the screening of Daughters of Mother India tomorrow. And we have the people who will really talk about it, so I'm not getting into this right now. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, and Max India Foundation, VLCC, Carrot Communications, Everstone, and Gray, without whose support this would not have been possible. With those few words, over to you, Laura. Thank you for explaining what the program is about.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. Good morning. I'm going to try that again. This is going to be an action conference. I need you to participate. Like, good morning. Excellent, thank you. On behalf of my team from EmancipAction, sitting at the corner over there, I want to just extend a very warm welcome as well to you, as Kiran did. We are so pleased to have you here. It has been a process, actually, over the last couple of months, finding you. And I'm not a big believer in coincidence, and as a result, I think that you all are in this room for a reason, and we are so glad you're here. It's been a delight to meet many of you. I feel like I know you already through reading about you through the nomination process. We have an incredibly diverse group of people in the room. We have people from the nonprofit sector, large and small. We have people from the private sector, entrepreneurs. We've got corporations represented. We have people from the government here at all different levels and from other governments. We're so pleased to have such a diverse group of you with us. We have young leaders and leaders of all ages from all these different areas, and that is your commonality. You have all been nominated because of the leadership that you have chosen, or that you have shown in your own spheres. You're people who have influence, and with that influence comes responsibility. It's not just this country that needs you. It's the world. It's our very interconnected world needs leaders like you to stand up and work on behalf of issues that are affecting all of us. And this is one that is very near and dear to my heart, but affects really every single person in this room, young and old, man and woman, Indian, non-Indian. So we thank you for being with us over the next couple of days, this journey of exploration. And we just really encourage you to participate in the conversations that happen, both at your table, in the breakout sessions. We encourage you to really be thinking, as we go through the program, what does this mean for me? What does this mean from my platform, where I stand, with my network, with my influence? What am I learning that is new, that complements what I already knew, perhaps, or what I didn't know? We have a very complex topic that we are going to try and unpack over the next couple of days. We're going to use a kind of artificial construct to do that. As many of you experts in the room already know much better than I probably, all of the drivers, the things that enable sexual violence to happen in our world and in our midst here in India are all interlinked. There are so many drivers. We've picked a handful of what we believe to be the key drivers of the problem. And we're separating them and trying to discuss those in just isolation. And it's hard to do that, right? Men's behaviors are highly influenced by the arts and media, as an example. 2 of our panels. We're going to try and keep those discussions separate so we can go deep. We want to get beyond the hyperbole and the high-level assumptions about what we know and get very deep into what are not only pragmatic solutions, but are effective, measurable, and impactful solutions. So we're going to spend a lot of time in the panels talking about both the problem as well as the solutions. And we want to try and give equal time to both. We want to ensure that our discussions are rich and deep, and that requires your participation. We'll put a handful of experts on a panel, but many of you in this room are deep experts in one piece of the problem. We ask you please to participate. We ask you please to engage with those around you on your table and in your midst on the problem. Help us to uncover the things, the information that we know may not be very clear or something that we might assume to be true, but the data shows to be true. So help us go deep. We ask that each one of you focuses on the specific challenges of implementation as well. We all know that probably intuitively some of the solutions, and what we want to do is make sure that we're taking this a level deeper, and we're going to the level of change, real change. So we know that the challenges we have are hard. We know that the solutions are hard, and we know that that changing behavior is hard. So we want to ask each one of you to talk about detail, to talk about implementation. How do we make the changes? Not just what the changes are and what they need to be. So as I said, this conversation, this two-day conversation is all about catalyzing action. It's the name of the conference. We hope that you will leave this place with your own sets of personal calls to action. We hope that you will engage at all levels, as mentioned. I hope that you will find this forum effective for your own personal use as you go forward to try and catalyze action in your own environments. We ask that you would consider where you can partner with others. We ask you that where you consider supporting others in your midst. You'll have opportunities to do that in the breakout sessions we're calling catalyst sessions. These are discussions, not presentations. This will be the opportunity for you to make this conference your own. And we ask you to do that. We ask that you would keep your energy up. We'll try and feed you along the way. We'll try to provide some entertainment and inspiration along the way. We've got a few surprises for you that way. And again, we thank you for being here. We ask, as you go through this couple of days, just one final thing. There is on each of your tables, you will have a personal call to action card. As you are inspired, please write on it. We ask that at the end of this conference, we're going to ask you to bring some forward. We hope that if you are so moved, that you will do so, and we get to watch each other kind of inspire each other just like a catalyst. So with that, I'm going to give the mic back over to Kiran to introduce our chairwoman. Thank you.
It is my privilege and honor to introduce the chair of the conference, Mrs. Naina Kidwai, Country Head India and Director HSBC Asia Pacific, and also Trustee of Ananta Aspen Center. And thank you very much for your leadership for this conference, Naina. Naina doesn't really need an introduction, and her detailed bio is with you, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least highlight a couple of her achievements. She has been associated with HSBC since 2002 and holds various influential positions both with the government and the private sector. I am out of time, okay. But I just can't resist saying that she has many firsts to her credit. She's the first Indian woman to be at the Harvard Business School and the first president of a major Indian business chamber. So with those very few words, over to you, Naina. Thank you.
Yeah. So let me start by saying I'm delighted to be here on a subject of grave national impact and importance, and delighted to be in the midst of so many experts, and I hope the leaders who are going to show us the way on how we take the country forward on this very important agenda of implementing what needs to happen to contain what is a very deep national malaise. So, Kiran, I think with your dynamic leadership at Ananta, I know that you took this subject forward, embraced it going forward, and it's one which certainly as a trustee of the Ananta Center, I would like to commit that we will not let this die. This is not going to be one event in a year. The implementation, the actions, the pledges that you take and move forward with are things that we must, at the center, embrace and move forward. And I think success is not going to be the success of attendance at an event such as this, but what emerges in terms of actions and the call to implementation, which both Kiran and Laura have actually said are important agenda items through the next 2 days. I'm clearly excited to be here in your midst. I'm no expert on the subject, but it's a subject I feel very deeply, and I'm here to learn and clearly to commit that this is an agenda that I will personally stay involved in through the Ananta Center and otherwise. It would be a shame if we let what is actually a huge awakening in India, if we let this opportunity fall. And, you know, yes, Laura, you mentioned it is of an international order. But it is, for me as an Indian who moves in global circles, a matter of deep shame that at economic events and meetings with people at the highest level, the discussion so often starts about the status of women in our country. And maybe it's aimed at me because I'm a woman from this country, but it, to me, always is a shame because it has happened because of the high amount of attention the Nirbhaya case got globally. And to me, that is great. It's great because if this isn't a call to action, nothing would be. And the shame would be if we did not convert this opportunity into what it should be, which is the actions that move forward. And we did have, I think, a watershed development in April 2013 to finally get the Act, the Vishaka Committee norms, which now many companies are, in fact, implementing. At FICCI, where I was president till last year, I personally led that initiative to ensure that we could populate our companies with what is, of course, legally required, but also everything else that must go behind it to ensure that it isn't just a policy and a tick box, that companies actually embrace this. And believe me, the journey is not an easy one. There are many that will sign off to say yes, but there's so much that needs to actually be put into place, including the social norms that we have to live with on a day-to-day basis. So we're very, very early in the journey in corporate India, which I do know well. We certainly are very, very early in our journey at a national level. And I think the timing of this event, therefore, is critical. Data from the National Crime Bureau suggests a growing incidence of rape reporting to the police, particularly in the past year. Past year increases have been attributed to better support for victim disclosure, and I suspect that there's some truth in that. But there is, and we cannot rule out the fact that rape cases themselves may be increasing. Are gang rapes on the rise? This isn't really quite clear from the lack of data, but some suggest it might be the case, and that is really worrying. So I take, of course, heart from the fact that there's a survey which Kiran shared with us, that 9 in 10 agree that this is a big problem. 9 in 10 Indians, right? And 8 out of 10 Indians believe the problems are growing, so that is worrying. And that 91% of men, 89% of women say that rape is a very big issue. So it is recognized as an issue across men and women, and I think this has to be a starting point. If the problem is identified and accepted, albeit there are clearly some politicians who don't get it, we have to ensure that we can make this the opportunity which we want to a call to action. We have many experts here coming in from various fields, sharing your expertise. I think one of the things we do very poorly in the country is we don't work enough together. We don't collaborate. We work in silos, and often it's the cross-cutting and the learnings that become important. You work on child marriage on the one hand, but why does child marriage happen? And actually one of them is because of the lack of security and fear of rape. So the connections are huge, and therefore we need to work together as we embark on this agenda, because much of what we do has clearly interlinkages across what we each do individually. And I think that has to be a very important part of this platform, that the learnings you have from your different fields, some of you know each other, not all of you know each other, but pulling it all together is as important to inform us on the agenda going forward. Gamut of topics being discussed, and I congratulate you on the structure of this particular event. everything from educating our kids to men's attitude, to law, to economics, to arts, to media, all very, very critical areas. And clearly, we need to begin to see what we need to do differently and what we need to do more of, and how we take that as a catalyst to making a call for action. What can each one of us do to end this nightmare? It is really a time for the next generation of Indian leaders from all sectors of society to consider how we can reverse this pandemic, and it is a pandemic, and contribute to making India safer and more equitable. We don't just want to focus on the challenges. We all know there's a problem out there, and the statistics are staring us in the face, but really to inspire everyone. This has to be a citizen movement. If we go away saying government needs to do this and the cops need to do that, yes, they do. And it's good that we identify what they need to do, but what can we do as we move forward? How can we galvanize citizens, students, people in this country, men and women, to take this as an agenda going forward? And as the chair of this event, I encourage you, therefore, like Kiran and Laura suggested, to be active participants. We need your minds, your experience, your thoughts, your ideas to focus the discussions and learnings. And at the end of the 2 days, I hope that we can identify the action points, the personal agendas that we will take away for ourselves, but also as a collective group, to follow through in terms of implementation. So I do hope that these 2 days will serve to ignite that spark within each one of us. I'm obviously speaking to the converted. You're here because you've embraced this subject, but really to enrich your experience and learnings as we go forward. And clearly, no sweeping cultural change is going to be possible unless we all contribute. Our women must enter the workplace. They must roam free. They must do this without fear. And at the end of the day, as long as security is an issue, women are going to be perceived as a burden on the family and on society. And we have to be able to curb this menace so that every vice that springs from it, whether it is child marriage or rape or abuse or domestic violence, is addressed as it needs to be. So on that note, thank you.
Thank you so much for your words, Naina. It's an honor to have you serve as our chairperson. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker for this morning. I will encourage each one of you to please read her bio that you have received. It is an extraordinarily long list of accomplishments, and out of respect for our time, I'm not going to go into all of them, but I do want to highlight a couple of things. Karuna Nundi is an advocate at the Supreme Court of India. She is an attorney who focuses on two very different topics, both human rights and corporate litigation. She has an extraordinary list of accomplishments, but including international advisory work on systems of government as well as human rights. She has her human rights work has included contributions to the anti-rape laws, the Criminal Law Amendment Bill of 2013 that we're all familiar with. Her pro bono work includes class action lawsuit work on the issue of sexual violence. But she has a wide commercial practice, including some really fun things, advising on the Renault F1 team and others. But most recently, Karuna is making headlines for the work that she's been doing as co-author of World War Manifesto. She's going to speak on that, and so I won't go into the details, but it is an incredibly decisive list, a 6-point plan for the incoming government, the incoming Lok Sabha, to address the issues that we're speaking about today and then some. I can think of absolutely no better person to be addressing us, to kick us off today, than Karuna Nundi. I do want to share one little side note, however. It has become very clear over the course of the few weeks that we've gotten to know each other that Karuna is a woman of incredible energy, incredible commitment, and incredible drive. Very little sleep, but she is a force of nature. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you and welcome to our stage my new friend, Karuna Nundi.
Thank you, Laura, for that very kind introduction, and thank you, everyone, for gathering here in this way today. I think this gathering is a very different gathering from one we may have had 2 years ago. There's a lot more hope. This violent city that assaults our persons and our dignities in so many different ways, it's shaped me, and it's shaped so many of us. And I never imagined the gusts of change that swept down Rajpath last winter. Sweeping aside barricades so easily, or that, so many men and women would just come out on the streets of Delhi and on the streets all over this country and say, enough, no more. That as women of privilege, as we are here, as Dalit women, as women in the corporate sector, as girl children, as women in Rajasthan, women in Tamil Nadu, women in the AFSPA areas, Mizoram, Chhattisgarh, there are very different kinds of challenges that we face. But the roots of these challenges are common. For the first time last winter, though, I think, the governments have come up a lot, and it's true that governments can't do anything, can't do everything, I beg your pardon. No, that wasn't a Freudian slip. It's true that governments can't be everything. And it's true that each one of us has a role to play. And it's true that each one of us has responsibilities in terms of dismantling the patriarchy within ourselves and the patriarchy without. But it is government that must lead this in a significant way. And for the first time in the winter of 2012 and 2013, a government knew in their guts, in North and South Bloc, that they could fall if they failed to serve women. And this is for the first time in our history as an independent nation. But the habits of patriarchy do run deep, and we see that in this election. One woman, one vote, you would think. But as 400 million women go to vote, political parties' message to women voters is that our concerns don't really matter. About 7% of the candidates fighting elections in the phases so far have been women. Promises and manifestos, I don't know how many of you have had a chance to look at those. Manifestos? Yeah? Yeah, you have. Okay. So few of you have, and some of the biggest parties have, that have huge billboards saying that we need to respect women. Disproportionate number of billboards. We need to respect women. We need to protect women. And no, we do not want your protection. We want our rights as citizens. Concrete promises are so thin on the ground that it's kind of amazing to me. You have goods and services taxes, which have very specific promises. Both the Congress and the BJP, for instance, make very specific promises on how to deal with the goods and services tax. I'm not saying this isn't important. But the kind of thinking that needs to go in to the promises that are being made on those billboards just isn't there. And that is the habit of patriarchy in government. And that is the habit of patriarchy and the tentacles of patriarchy with our political leaders. So last month we came together. Dalit movements, Christian movements, atheists and communists, corporate leaders, actors, economists, and lawyers. And we set out a 6-point program that says what the next government, what the next Lok Sabha needs to do to realize our constitutional rights. And these are constitutional rights. These are things that government actually has to do. Why does government have to do it? Because these are actually enforceable through the courts. The large proportion of the rights that we're going to set out here. It was interesting to me also that the polls that were done weren't even asking the right questions. And as I was looking through the polls, I actually got in touch with somebody who's an expert at the Carnegie Institute. And he said, well, actually, it's true that the questions just weren't being asked. What is it that's important to women voters? Not presuming that corruption will be as important across the board. Not presuming that it operates in the same way, for instance. But in support of our manifesto campaign, a poll was done. And when the right questions were asked, the answers became quite clear. That 91% of voters, and this actually corroborates the data you cited, I think that was the Pew Research poll. This is an MRDA Avaz poll. That 91% of voters said that this was an election priority, that in these elections, violence against women was the #2 priority after corruption. If it is the #2 priority after corruption, why still the disjunct? Why the rollback in what parties are doing? Why is it that whichever government that comes next has had to be pressured and encouraged and inspired into doing this work? Why did it not happen before? The Indian Elections Manifesto is short. It's called in Hindi it's called the Mahila Azadi Ghoshna Patra. In Bengali, the Jatiyo Nari Ishtihar. It's been translated also in Telugu and Assamese. If it's implemented, it could bring us a basic freedom from fear, a basic amount of political power, and a basic economic flourishing. It's up there, but the font's a bit small. Might it be possible to zoom in? On the... Yeah. On the manifesto, on educate for equality. So the first point is educate for equality. It's even above make laws count. Why is that? It's because the transforming our cultures is what will strike at the root of violence and inequality and discrimination. It is what will prevent a problem from happening before it happens. It's what will make sure that a woman doesn't have to go through the experience of discrimination or violence or inequality and then go through the process where redressal is required in the first place. How do we do this? And for the longest time, I think a lot of people presumed that governments didn't need to be involved in this. But it is only governments that can lead this well. Why? Because these programs have to be mass, they have to be long-term, they have to be funded, and they have to be across the board in different areas. First, having age-appropriate workshops in school so that little boys and girls know what it is to be a little boy and a girl and what it doesn't mean, to deconstruct gender, to deal with violence in ways, to deal with anger in ways that are not violent. To have sex education at an age-appropriate level, to make sure that teachers know what they're talking about when they're dealing with gender. Cell phone penetration in this country is extremely high, and it's only getting higher. The last government we spoke to, we asked the last government to undertake an SMS campaign by which, and nowadays you can download these 1 rupee videos, and take an SMS campaign by which you have videos that change people's minds, and they have been demonstrated to do so. Tested through focus groups, evidence-based. we know that governments have done this in the past. Governments have rolled back polio, they've rolled back HIV/AIDS. A strong component of this was behavior change. Making laws count. Now, making laws count, our laws actually, they're still not perfect, but they're not that bad. And as Justice Verma said at the end of, when he launched his committee report, he said that even as the laws that exist today, even if they were enforced, we would see a massive change on the ground. So here we ask, the commitments are that we will ensure each government agency produces a detailed action plan to implement laws to end violence against women. So what does this mean? Each ministry sits down and breaks it down. You break down whether it'll take more chairs and tables, whether it'll take more staff, whether it'll take more gender training, whether the incentives need to change, in terms of the staff that is tasked to implement laws. And then these various ministries sit together. There is a finance bill, and that funding is given for these laws. This is never done in India. It has never been done with the penal code, and it's certainly not done in rights that are civil and political, which is what violence concerns. In countries like Brazil and South Africa, however, many bills are not even considered until they are costed. So not only do you get a concrete examination of what is required to implement laws, you have ministries across the board. So for instance, when you're talking about violence, you may also have the Ministry of Water and Sanitation looking at this because toilets are important. This is a situs of extreme violence and how you deal, and so therefore this ministry also needs to come on board. And you have coordination, you have linkages. This is a commitment. So this is one major commitment that we have sought and focused on. Putting women in power. Who are the people who are passing our laws at the moment? It's kind of startling when you start listening to them carefully. When the debate happened in the Lok Sabha during the criminal law amendment bill, there were people, across parties that sort of, men and women actually, that came out as progressive, that came out as people who had thought about these things, that had bothered to acquire the technical expertise as well. Tathagat Satpathy, for instance, from the BJD, which is, I'm not singling out any particular party, it's just that individuals really across the board made it clear that stalking couldn't only be non-bailable at the second offense, And that's what the law says now. You can't wait for your stalker, which in any case stalking means being followed repeatedly, to be arrested for the second time for this to be non-bailable. This is a problem, because there's likely to be a backlash. And he raised this. Supriya Sule, again, great speech at the time. There were notable exceptions, and I think many of us remember those. Somebody said, but we used to follow girls in college all the time. I mean, sort of essentially saying that, I committed all these criminal acts and it's okay. Normalizing this behavior. But these are the people, many of these people are the people who make our laws. So we're also asking for a code of conduct that means that you don't have misogynist comments in the Lok Sabha, you don't have misogynist behavior in the Lok Sabha, but most importantly, that 33% of the people who make our laws are women. This is fundamentally important. At the moment, so few candidates in this Lok Sabha election are women, and a lot of people are saying, we don't have the reservation bill. Well, the BJP and the Congress have both committed to bringing the women's reservation bill in, and that commitment is something that they need to be held to account for. Because regardless of what the constitution of this Lok Sabha is, if the BJP and the Congress vote for this bill, and leaders of various parties have held hands, women leaders of various parties have held hands, and it has not been successful, but the parties themselves have now committed, and that is something that is very important to get through. Policing for the people. I mean, the police has, in its own way, various state polices have tried to respond to the increased pressure in this crisis by having more gender sensitization. Now, in 2000, I was an officer on special duty at the National Human Rights Commission, and I conducted a gender training workshop. It was a residential workshop with Punjab police and Assam police and, various people, various police forces across North India. And, it works for a bit, but it doesn't really stick. So what do we really need to change things? How do we make sure that, the Mumbai Police Commissioner, like Satyapal Singh, is not saying things, is not thinking things and then saying things, the former Mumbai Police Commissioner. Like, with so much promiscuity in Mumbai, how do you expect us to contain rape? That message goes through the ranks. Incentives in structures need to change. So when a police person is recruited, a senior officer through the UPSC, or a constable on the ground, they need to be interviewed and evaluated on what their attitudes are to gender. At the moment, people say, "Kad kitna hai, chaudai kitni hai?" Just like, how tall are you and how broad are you? It's not good enough. When people are promoted, the recruits are not going to be perfect. We know that. The gender trainings are important because the gender trainings must support that growth and development. But the metric has to be there. When these people are promoted, they must be promoted and rewarded on the basis of these metrics, on the basis of no moral policing, and on the basis of the efficacy of their actions, on their basis of respect for women and respect for women as citizens. They must be penalized on the same basis, and service rules need to change in this regard. Swift and certain justice. There's a lot of talk of fast-track courts, but the thing is that in my experience, what happens is that usually it's the same judge that has the same docket, but a particular case gets designated as a fast-track case, right? So there he is, or she, burdened with a whole bunch of paperwork, because the number of judges we have at the moment is still about 14 per million. 14 per million, we're below Ghana. The criminal justice system, the oft talked about criminal justice system is actually quite thin on the ground. The number of police per million, also very low. We are asking for the number of judges to be increased in the period of 5 years in a staggered way, in an effective way, to 40 per million at least. Also, for some changes in laws. At the moment, if you are married, a married woman cannot be legally beaten. A married woman can't be legally killed. It's a crime by her husband. Any kind of non-sexual assault is also criminal. But raping your wife, that is legal. And it's explicitly illegal. What actually shocked me when I first looked at this law is that it's explicitly legal. It's an explicit exception. And our parliament this time failed to remove that exception. Problems of evidence are cited, problems of evidence can be dealt with. In any case, we have evidentiary issues in cases. Our conviction rate is about 27%. And that's of reported cases. Only a tiny percentage of cases go to court in any case. People ask sometimes why we have asked for the repeal of Section 377 of the IPC. Not only are women of any sexual orientation and any coming from any gender identity entitled to the same rights as any other citizen of this country, but also this is in recognition of the fact that gender is a continuum. There is a way in which the man inside me and the woman inside you is suppressed, that we're put into these boxes. That I may be particularly male when I'm arguing a case in court, and I may be particularly female in another context. And the female aspect of a man who wants to raise his child and stay at home, the female aspect of a man who wants to break out of his own box, is frequently suppressed. And that is the thing that is something that has prevented 377 from being repealed so far. There have been very progressive judgments in the last week. They don't go far enough at the moment, but at least the third gender has been recognized, and next week, the criminalization of 377 is going to be reconsidered. And for those of you who don't know what 377 is, it's unlawful carnal intercourse against the order of nature. And in the earlier part of the century, it was interpreted as bestiality, but a lot of people of different sexual orientations have been harassed and persecuted because of it. Economic flourishing, equal pay for equal work in all sectors. It's not a commonly known fact that there isn't any law that guarantees that if you don't work for the government, that you must have equal pay for equal work, that you must be promoted in the same way. Parties are competing to claim credit for the National Rural Guarantees Act and scheme, but creches aren't available and other kinds of critical supports that make sure that the women who are the majority of these workers are guaranteed the kind of support they need to do that work. Universal non-contributory old age pensions for women, action plans to accelerate quality education for girls, including infrastructure, personnel, training, monitoring, and evaluation supported by central finances. Now, this is not the kind of thing, like a lot of this is not the kind of thing that governments necessarily should be, or political parties should need to be asked to commit to. I mean, a lot of this is just process stuff, right? A lot of this is just no-brainers. But we find that it never happens. But the Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party and the CPI-ML, parties across political orientations, have committed to this manifesto. The BJP, whose manifesto devotes one page of 43 to women, has said that they can't take such outside ideas on board, but given that most of their billboards promise respect, respect and equality are required at some point, whether it's in their state governments or in the central government, to translate into concrete action, we are hoping that this will translate also to these concrete commitments. Some members of the BJD have said that they'll get their parties on board, as have the members of the Trinamool Congress. Some people believe that patriarchy will wither away with development. But while our figure of women parliamentarians in the Lok Sabha is 11%, the UK's is only 18%, and the US is about 22 to 23%. Our conviction rate for reported rapes is about 26% in India. In the United Kingdom, the conviction rate is about 7%. So the tentacles of patriarchy really run deep, and they are everywhere. And we have a lot more work to do. We have more work to do so the young woman in Hisar can choose her partner and use her cell phone and wear her jeans without being hacked to death because someone else's honor was offended. We have more to do so the constable on duty registers the assault complaint of the Dalit woman in Bihar, and the judge doesn't reduce the rapist's sentence because he's just passed the IIT exam. We have more to do so the advertising professional and the government clerk and the agricultural worker get equal pay for equal work, so that that worker doesn't lose power and money because she's had children. And we can only do this together. Through coordinated political and litigation strategies, yes. Through the dismantling of patriarchy outside, yes. But also the dismantling of patriarchy that is within each of us. Making sure that our sons see their father do half the housework, for instance. Making sure that our daughters grow up with a sense of freedom, making sure that we ourselves act in every way with that internalized sense of freedom. We have a solid constitution to stand on, and we have the knowledge and the winds of righteousness on our backs. Together, we can claim the freedom and the equality and the power that is our birthright. Let's not forget that the first freedom movement happened essentially because there was one generation, and by generation I don't just mean 7 years, I mean it in a larger context. You know, everyone who's here today took it forward. And yes, we would need persistence, and we would need ingenuity, and we would need all the power at our command, but we can do this. Thank you.
Karuna, thank you so much. I look at the War Manifesto, it's now been removed, but I think you have a copy of on your tables, and I think, wow, how many of our panels are completely aligned with your manifesto? I can't think of a better outline for our time together. I thank you for your words, your wisdom, your insights, but also your commitment to this incredibly important thing that we're all together working on. So thank you, Karuna. With that, just a point of process. You'll notice when you look at your agenda, please look at it if you would. We have not built into this conference a whole lot of breaks. And the reason for that is that we value your time too much. We've got too much good stuff to talk about. So we're just going to say, if you need to do a bio break, you just slip out. We will have tea for you when it's necessary, and there will be lunch, I promise. But in the meantime, we're just going to keep going. We're going to bring more people up. We're going to have great conversations. And the next item on our agenda is a very exciting one. It's our Economic Empowerment Panel. Is a job enough? I'm going to thank our chairperson and Kiran and Karuna for their words, and I'm going to invite our economic panel to come to the forefront. And while they come forward, I'm going to give you a little introduction of our moderator in just a moment.